Let's talk about fascism and framing. In 2016, a month after the US election, historian John Broich wrote an article in The Guardian entitled "The Media Has Fallen for Fascists Before," the thesis of which states that the media in the US trivialized the rise of Mussolini and Hitler throughout the 1920s, so much so that American opinions of the duo were broadly positive, or at the very least, neutral. Mussolini was portrayed positively, or again, at least neutrally, in coverage even after taking control of Italy in a coup and naming himself ruler for life. With the New York Times crediting fascism, the brave new experiment, as having returned Italy to a sense of normalcy. Hitler seemed to be treated with a sense of comedy, referring to his nonsensical screeching and his appearance suggesting Charlie Chaplin rather than a force to be reckoned with. American media said that seasoned politicians would outplay him in Parliament, or he would at the very least have to moderate his views. Reporters in the Third Reich knew that they could only report so much on what was happening, or they would lose access. And losing access meant losing sales. No one ever recognizes their dictator in advance. He never stands for election on the platform of dictatorship. He always represents himself as the instrument of the incorporated national will. When our dictator turns up, you can depend on it that he will be one of the boys, and he will stand for everything traditionally American. Now, many people out there, and I'm sure some people watching, don't watch the news. You consider yourself apolitical. Hate it when you go to a dinner party and someone's talking about politics. Far be it from I to broach some kind of gauche subject on your social media feeds, but I think that this is quite important because we need to talk about this. Because it's happened once before and it's happening again. Actually, to be more specific, it's already happened. The media crediting a strong man for bringing back a sense of normalcy? Check. The media trivializing a far-right candidate and his candidacy and his supporters. Check. The media claiming our far-right strongman is really a moderate.
Donald Trump is a moderate. He's actually the most moderate candidate for decades.
Or, at the very least, will have to moderate his views in office? Check. Yes, I'm calling Donald Trump a fascist. If you disagree with me, where have you been for the past 4, 5 years? Clearly not paying attention. Now, before we get to the meat and veg here, it is time for a primer on fascism. When you think of fascism, you might struggle to put exactly what it is into words without using words like Nazi or Hitler. This is because fascism isn't a codified ideology like, say, socialism or capitalism or classical liberalism. Fascism is described by Columbia University's Robert Paxton as a form of political practice distinctive to the 20th century that arouses popular enthusiasm by sophisticated propaganda techniques for an anti-liberal, anti-socialist, violently exclusionary, expansionist, nationalist agenda. Sounds wordy, and it is. That's because fascism as an ideology is about the pursuit and attainment of power. The principles of fascist governments change and vary from person to leader, but the key thing binding them together is the pursuit of power. The pursuit of power over other people. Umberto Eco codifies what he believes are the 14 key aspects of a fascist movement in the essay Ur-Fascism, with ideas ranging from a cult of tradition, there is no advancement of learning as the truth has already been spelled out, to the natural fear of difference, the first appeal of fascism being protection from intruders. Life is permanent warfare under fascism. The people and the state are constantly under attack from an unseen enemy. But that enemy also needs to be entirely weak and beatable. Thus, by the constant shifting of rhetorical focus, the enemies are at the same time too strong and too weak. Echoing our Dorothy Thompson quote from the opening, Eco ends the essay with, "We must keep alert so that the sense of these words will not be forgotten again. Ur-fascism is still around us, sometimes in plain clothes. It would be so much easier for us if there appeared on the world scene someone saying, 'I want to reopen Auschwitz. I want the black shirts to parade in the Italian squares.' Life is not that simple. Ur-fascism can come back under the most innocent of disguises." Now, why am I bringing this up? The truth is that the liberal media, that is, the media in our liberal democracies, is woefully under-equipped to fight this kind of fascist rhetoric, and the people willing to game the system to perpetrate that kind of fascist rhetoric. We saw this in 2016, when Trump himself used outrageous inflammatory statements to get thousands more media minutes than any other candidate, because he knew he could say anything, no matter how insane, crazy, racist, sexist, anything, and it would get him airtime. We see this in Australia, when newscasters platform far-right ideologues for the exact same reason, and they got airtime to share their views, with the barest of pushback. When presented with strong men presenting ideas full of racist, sexist, anti-Semitic, ableist violence, well, our media system has no recourse for that. In Western society, we believe in the free marketplace of ideas, that if a bad idea is presented, all you need is a good idea to come along and wipe it off the map. But you cannot defeat fascism in the marketplace of ideas, because said marketplace requires both sides to be working in good faith. And one side is not arguing in good faith. Fascists, alt-right figureheads, white nationalists, all they aim to do is push the conversation towards their ideas, onto the ears and minds of those impressionable watchers. They don't care if someone comes on to debate them, because getting the time is all they want. Trump, in his opening statement as a presidential candidate, talked about Mexicans as though they were rapists and drug dealers, setting a precedent for a campaign that was racist, sexist, ableist, anti-Semitic, and he won. If that's not good enough evidence, I don't know how to convince you. All press is good press. The second issue is that the liberal media treats fascist as a dirty word. You can't call someone a fascist because fascists don't exist. We beat the Nazis. It's not possible. They cannot call a fascist because the fascist has a legion of fans and a certain media network ready to slander any journalist as a left-wing Antifa ideologue out to destroy their freedom. But more importantly, they could lose access. And losing access loses sales. Where have I heard that before? Alexander Hennem, a Bosnian author and columnist for the New York Times, wrote in an article in 2018, "To engage properly with the white nationalists and supremacists presently populating and energizing the American government, they must be identified as what they are: fascists. Much of American media and press on the side of Fox News darkness does not dare to call out a fascist. That is partly out of a knee-jerk complicity with the culture of leadership and celebrity worship. If Bannon were to be called as he is, a fascist, the marketplace of ideas would have to confront the fact that the American government is becoming rapidly radicalized, that things unimaginable might be around the corner, and that there are many tempting paths to full collaboration. The idea that we're all in this together and that we must keep talking is dangerous, because we might find ourselves wasting time and anger on a fundamentally unbalanced dialogue where one side is armed with ideas and the other is armed with weapons. That's the quote. There's your stinger. If you take away nothing else from this video, take away that line. One side is armed with ideas and the other side is armed with weapons. And they do not care who they use them on. Blair Cottrell, literal Nazi, was platformed by Sky News and allowed to spew forth his hateful anti-immigration rhetoric without any pushback. So much so that Sky News shared 3 separate clips of his views on their social media. Just to, drum up press, I suppose. Mile Yiannopoulos, far-right grifter and pedophile apologist, used an appearance on Studio 10 to push his plainly horrid views. He called Jessica Rowe a half-bald feminist. He inferred that journalists have nothing other to do but ruin people's lives. Unlike him, he's a comedian, couldn't do anything like that. And he pushed his show, his live show, where he pushed the view that Muslim women are members of a brainwashed death cult. Joe Hildebrand, one of the journalists on said program, even laughed along and called him funny and witty, further normalizing Milo and his views. Allowing these kinds of ideas mainstream airtime does nothing other than normalize them. That's plainly it. The laughter from Hildebrand, the half-hearted questions from Rowe and Drysdale, and that once it gets on social media, suddenly there's an army of grifters sharing it to their thousands of followers. To allow these people on your programs to share their ideals does nothing else than say that you tacitly approve of what comes from that. Because it makes you money, doesn't it? Now, I'm not saying that you, dear viewer, are, collaborating, for lack of a better word. But you have to come out and say that it's just not good enough. You don't give airtime to fascists because you can't frame fascism as an idea to be defeated, because the people supporting those ideas, they don't care if you defeat them, because once someone's heard those ideas, once an impressionable, white, disaffected male hears that their problems can be solved by blaming someone else, someone, darker, more Jewish, more female, then suddenly that sticks. And no matter what you say, that's not going away. Don't give fascists airtime, because giving fascists airtime begets more fascists. Don't frame fascism